Legends of Runeterra is widely praised for its contributions to the broader League mythos, fleshing out the world and giving the spotlight to characters that are otherwise neglected or forgotten about. While some champions are popular enough to warrant multiple appearances across Riot's various projects, others are sadly left in the dust with outdated designs or next to no story progression. The card game has picked up a lot of that slack over the years, but it adapts some champions more gracefully than others. Welcome to Runeterra Rankings, where I attempt to break down how every League champion has been adapted into the trading card game and rank them based on the following criteria: gameplay, art, and story. There are 5 total points to earn in each category, with a perfect score totaling to 15. With all that out of the way, let's jump right in, shall we? Annie was released in League of Legends during the game's launch all the way back in 2009, making her one of the oldest champions in the game despite her canonical age. She's a fire mage who has the ability to bring her teddy bear, Tibbers, to life, transforming it into a murderous flaming bear beast that acts as her protector. She's actually a fairly unique premise for a character by League's early standards, but unfortunately falls on the more neglected end of Riot's character spectrum. So, how does she measure up in LOR? Let's take a look. Annie was released in the World Walker expansion, with her intended synergy partner being Jhin. Her gameplay revolves around seeing you trigger the effects of 6 fast spells, slow spells, or unit skills while she's on the field. Fittingly enough, Annie has her own skill effect that counts towards this level up requirement, burning any enemy that tries to block her. When she reaches level 2, she creates Tibbers in your hand, a decently powerful 6-cost unit that stuns an enemy, then deals damage to all enemies on the field who were already stunned. It's quite apparent that Annie's card in LOR is an attempt to adapt her gameplay in League rather than any particular elements in her story. In League of Legends, Annie's playstyle revolves around activating spells in quick succession to trigger her passive, Pyromania. When Annie casts 4 spells in a row, Pyromania will cause her next offensive spell to have the added bonus of stunning an enemy in addition to dealing damage. Triggering various effects to level her up is likely meant to be an homage to her Pyromania ability, though the number is bumped up from 4 to 6, likely to make things a little more balanced. It's also a clever touch that Tibbers can stun an enemy when summoned, as he does in League if you summon him right on top of an enemy champion. Overall, the LOR devs definitely seem to be trying to incorporate her mechanics from the MOBA as closely as they could in the card game, and I feel they did a fairly solid job in that regard. Personally, I would have leaned a bit more towards adapting her destructive personality, since even her story shows how much she enjoys burning down buildings and the like, but we'll get to that in a moment. Overall, I give Annie's gameplay adaptation a 4 out of 5. Annie's narrative is an interesting case to me. After the great retcon that overhauled several characters' stories, Riot went out of their way to give Annie an entire animated short film depicting her new origin. She's an extremely tragic character who awakened to her pyromantic powers at an early age, but due to her lack of control over them, wound up burning and killing her entire family on complete accident. First her sister, then her father, and lastly, when her adoptive mother blamed her for the tragedies, Annie's rage spiraled out of control and turned Tibbers into a flaming bear monster for the first time. After that, Annie sort of just became a wandering orphan, seemingly repressing her trauma under a veil of childlike innocence and a cutesy demeanor. She treats everything like a game now, especially burning things. Though after an incident in a bar where some asshole adults tried to pick on her, we don't really know where she went or what she's been up to. Legends of Runeterra went hard to remedy that. We got an entire short story, The Eyes and the Embers, that goes more depth into Annie's birth mother, Ameline. Turns out that Ameline was not only a gifted pyromancer as well, but her talents with the element led her to becoming a Black Rose experiment. They hoped that her ability to control flame would make her an ideal vessel to control the fire demon, Tybulk, without being possessed. Unfortunately, this wasn't quite as successful as the Black Rose hoped. While Ameline could keep Tybulk in check for a time, it still had ways of exerting its control over her, and that influence would eventually go on to affect Annie. While wandering the Noxian countryside, Annie is found and taken in by a man named Flynn, who knew Ameline and recognized the girl's resemblance to her. Flynn brings Annie to a school called the Ravenbloom Conservatory, which is primarily meant to help train young prodigy mages in Noxus. There, she meets and befriends some of the other students, though notably lacks any interest in long, boring lectures, as you would expect from a child. Eventually, she's coaxed by the spirit of Tybulk inside her to let loose and burn the school to cinders, even briefly releasing the demon's full power. Thankfully, most of Annie's friends and teachers seem to survive, but her level 2 art shows Annie strolling away from the inferno while everyone else panics and attempts to douse the flames. She's like the living embodiment of that one meme with the girl staring ominously into the camera while a house burns into the background. That's where her story ends for now, but it's honestly amazing to me how much content she got with her addition to the card game. Annie's lore in LOR is absolutely fantastic in my opinion. Not only do her cards give her a proper storyline, but we learn so much more about her family lineage. It ties Annie's story nicely into the Black Rose and even goes out of its way to show why and how she's able to turn Tibbers into a flaming bear monster. They didn't have to do that, but the fact that she's channeling a literal demon into her toy to act as a guardian is one of the raddest reveals I think Riot has ever done. Overall, Annie's story in Runeterra gets a 5 out of 5 from me. Since her debut, Annie's design has always depicted her wearing this sort of schoolgirl uniform, which is odd considering that we've never actually heard of her going to any sort of school before now. Moreover, the schoolgirl outfit in question looks a bit too much like something you'd see a child in the modern real world wearing, not something in a pseudo-medieval fantasy world. Legends of Runeterra rectifies this not just by tossing Annie into a Noxian Academy for mages, but giving her a proper outfit that fits the Noxian vibe to match. Before that, though, her level 1 splash art shows Annie wearing a plainer, more tattered looking dress, which is extremely appropriate considering that she's been wandering the world on her own for an unknown amount of time after the death of her family. It's not entirely clear when she dyed her hair, or if that's maybe just a result of Tybulk's influence somehow, but you can clearly see from the devilish smirk and the fake horns that she is not some helpless traumatized child, despite what Flynn may seem to think. Her level 2 art shows her adorning the Ravenbloom Conservatory attire, which of course is designed to resemble armor as much as a school uniform. Again, this is Noxus. In spite of that, it does still vaguely resemble schoolgirl uniforms you might expect to see in the real world, even incorporating a brown leather backpack that seems more fitting for the time period rather than the cutesy pink one shown in her League splash art. Overall, LOR's Annie design feels like the most natural reimagining you can get for the character without a full VGU. Thus, I rank it as a 5 out of 5. Overall, Legends of Runeterra Annie gets a rather solid 14 out of 15 for me. The design is solid, the lore is amazing, and the gameplay feels true enough to the character as she exists in League. My only gripe is that I feel like her playstyle could have incorporated a bit more of her personality into it, but overall, that's a bit of a nitpick. But what do you all think? Do you agree with my rating? Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.